Money appears stable. You earn it, you store it. You see the same number remain. Nothing seems to change. But stability is an illusion, because money does not exist in isolation. It exists inside a system that is constantly moving. Prices move, costs move, value shifts. And those movements are not always visible at once. They happen gradually, quietly, which is why most people don't notice them. They look at the number and assume the value is unchanged. But the number is only one part of the equation. What matters is what that number can actually do, what it can buy, what it can access, what it can control. And that is where the shift begins. Because purchasing power does not stay fixed. It changes over time. Sometimes slowly enough that it feels invisible. Sometimes fast enough that it becomes obvious. But it is always changing, even when the number does not. This is the first misunderstanding. People think holding money preserves value, but holding money only preserves the number, not the power behind it. And over time, that difference widens. Slowly at first, then more noticeably. This is not because money is being taken. It is because the system around it is expanding. More currency, more activity, more movement. And as that system grows, the relative strength of static money weakens. Not dramatically, not all at once, but consistently. This is why the change is often ignored, because it does not feel like loss. It feels like nothing, which is more dangerous. Because obvious loss triggers reaction. Invisible loss does not. So the system continues, without resistance, while the real value of stored money shifts beneath the surface. This is the quiet movement, the one that does not announce itself, the one that does not create urgency, but still changes outcomes over time. Because what matters is not how much you have, but what it can actually do. And that ability is not fixed. It is constantly being adjusted by the system, whether you are paying attention or not. This is the starting point. Money is not static. It only appears that way. And that appearance is where most people stop thinking. The change does not come from the money itself. It comes from the environment around it, from the system that defines its value. This is where inflation enters, not as a sudden event, but as a continuous process. Inflation is not just prices increasing. It is the gradual reduction of what money can access. The same amount buys less over time, not because the number changed, but because everything around it did. More currency enters the system. More activity expands. More demand competes for the same resources. And that pressure pushes prices upward. Quietly, incrementally, but consistently. This consistency is what makes inflation powerful, because it compounds. A small increase this year builds on the next, and the next, creating a long-term drift, one that is difficult to detect in the short term, but significant over time. This is why it often feels manageable at first, because each step is small. Each adjustment is minor. Each shift is gradual. But the accumulation of those shifts changes the entire landscape. Costs rise. Expectations rise. Baseline expenses increase. And the gap begins to widen between what money used to do and what it does now. This is the quiet erosion, not a sudden loss, but a steady decline in capability, which is harder to react to, because it never feels urgent. It feels gradual. And gradual changes rarely trigger immediate action. So behavior stays the same. Money remains stored, untouched, unchanged, while its effectiveness decreases. This is where time becomes a factor, because inflation is not about a single moment. It is about duration. The longer money sits, the more exposure it has to this ongoing shift, to this quiet reduction. And over time, that reduction becomes meaningful. This is the second layer. Money does not decay on its own. It decays relative to everything else, relative to prices, relative to demand, relative to the system. And that relativity is what makes it difficult to see. Because nothing appears to be taken, but less remains, not in number, but in function. And function is what matters, because function determines real-world outcomes, what you can afford, what you can access, what you can sustain. And as inflation continues, those limits shift. Quietly, consistently, structurally. If this feels familiar, if you've felt this pressure but never had words for it, this channel isn't here to motivate you. It's here to help you see clearly. If that resonates, like the video. Subscribe. More clarity is coming. Inflation is not the only force acting on money. There is an opposing force, one that works in the opposite direction. Compounding. Not as a concept, but as a mechanism. Compounding allows value to build on itself. Returns generate additional returns. Growth feeds growth. And over time, that process accelerates. At first, it looks similar to accumulation. Small increases, minimal change, limited visibility. But compounding is different, because each step increases the base, and a larger base produces larger results, even if the rate stays the same. This creates a shift over time from linear growth to exponential behavior. Early on, the curve is flat, almost indistinguishable from no movement, which is why it is often ignored or abandoned, because it does not feel impactful. It does not produce immediate change. But the structure is forming. Each cycle adds to the base. Each addition increases the next outcome. And eventually, the curve begins to rise, not gradually, but more noticeably, more quickly. This is where compounding becomes visible. But visibility is delayed. The real work happened earlier, during the flat phase, during the stage where nothing appeared to change, which is why most people never reach acceleration. They exit too early, before the structure has enough mass, before the curve begins to turn. And as a result, they never experience the effect. This is where compounding and inflation interact. If money is left static, inflation reduces it. If money is placed into a compounding structure, it can outpace that reduction. This is the balance between decay and growth, between erosion and expansion. And time determines which side dominates. If the rate of compounding exceeds the rate of inflation, value increases, in real terms. If it does not, value declines, even if the number rises, because the system is still moving, prices are still adjusting, demand is still shifting, and that movement continues regardless of your position. This is why compounding is not optional. It is structural. It is the only mechanism that allows money to keep pace with a system that is constantly expanding. Without it, money falls behind, quietly, gradually, but consistently. Time does not treat money equally. It amplifies whatever structure the money is placed into. Nothing more, nothing less. If money is left static, time works against it. Inflation reduces it. Quietly, without a visible event, without a clear moment of loss, but the reduction is real. And it compounds, year after year, cycle after cycle, until the difference becomes noticeable. But by then, time has already done its work. This is one side of time, decay. The other side is leverage. If money is placed into a compounding structure, time works with it. Growth builds on growth, returns reinforce returns, and the base expands at an increasing rate. This is the shift. Time is not neutral. It is directional. It pushes money toward one of two outcomes: erosion or expansion. There is no middle state. Because the system does not pause, it continues moving. Prices continue adjusting. Value continues shifting. And money inside that system is affected either way. This is the final layer. What happens to your money over time is not random. It is determined by structure, where it sits, how it is used, what system it is placed into. Time then amplifies that structure. If the structure is passive, decay compounds. If the structure is active, growth compounds. The outcome is not immediate. It unfolds gradually, then noticeably, then significantly, until the difference becomes undeniable. Not because something sudden happened, but because time was applied consistently. This is why the question is not, how much money do you have? The question is, what is your money doing over time? Because that determines the outcome. Not the starting point, not the initial amount, but the structure it is placed into, and the time it is exposed to that structure. If this changed how you see money over time, subscribe. Like this if it clarified something.